Hi, I'm AJ Wilcox, and today I'm going to help you analyze the performance of your ads on LinkedIn. When you're running ads on LinkedIn, it can be really difficult to assess the performance of each individual ad when you're running a lot of them, or even if you're running the same ads but in a lot of different campaigns. So today I'm going to walk you through exactly how to do this inside of Excel quickly, easily, and basically you'll be an Excel ninja when we're done. For background, I'm AJ Wilcox. I'm the founder of B2Linked.com, and we are the LinkedIn ads agency. We've managed over $150 million of spend on the platform. We're official LinkedIn partners. We've managed some of LinkedIn's largest spending accounts worldwide, and I'm the host of the LinkedIn Ads Show podcast, which maybe many of you listen to and have come here because of that. Without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. So first off, inside of your LinkedIn ads account, we're going to need to export some ad data in order to get it into Excel to start analyzing. So the way that you do that is from within your dashboard, you set your time range to the time that you care about, and then you hit export. As for report type, because we're wanting to specifically analyze the ads in the account, we want ad performance. All columns is great. The more data, the better. And for time breakdown, I like to do ad performance for all time because it's going to simplify a report. It means every ad inside of Excel is going to be just one row. Whereas if you had the by month broken out, it means every month that ad ran, the same ad will be a separate row. Or by day, it would be every single day that ad ran, you'll have a whole separate row inside of Excel. So let's do ad performance for all time. This is not actually the account that we're going to be working inside of. So you'll see the process here, and then I'm actually going to open up a different sheet. Okay, so I've cleansed this sheet a little bit just to preserve our client's privacy. The first thing I did was I deleted like the first 5 or 6 rows of data that were all just blank. It's all metadata. Then the next thing I like to do is I like to highlight the entire first row of headers and make them bold. I do that with Control B on PC. I also like to go to View and freeze my top row of data. That means no matter where I scroll, I can still see the headers up above here. Next, I like to highlight all of my data. You can do it here in the upper left-hand corner or on the PC, Control A. And then under Home, I like to go to Sort and Filter and hit Filter. This makes it so every one of these rows I can sort or filter. This used to be called auto filter. Then there are a few columns here that I actually care about, like for instance, campaign name. I might want a little bit of extra room here. And then depending on how you've named your ads or how you've organized them, you might want a few other fields enlarged a little bit so you can see them and read them a little bit more easily. So like creative name, you can see we've used this one very specifically, and ad intro and ad headline are both great this way. And I'm going to make the sheet a little bit bigger as well, just so it's easier for you to view. And of course, because this is Excel, it's infinitely extensible. You can do whatever you want here. But one thing that you might want to do is just clean up any additional column that you don't think you're going to be looking at. So for instance, anything outside of campaign name, I probably don't care about. It's all the stuff like the currency, the account name, which I already know, the date range, which again, I already know. So I can right click anywhere here and hit hide. And as you can see, this is one campaign here, but I have a lot of different ads running within it. So this is going to be really helpful for me to understand what am I saying that's really engaging to my audience versus what should I avoid saying in the future. Now that I've gotten this where I want it, if I select everything on this sheet, Control A, or clicking this button in the upper left-hand corner to select everything, I can now create a pivot table, which is going to be really important. I can go to Insert, Pivot Table, and From Table Range. This is the default. It's what I almost always do. It's going to take all of the data from that table, which is great. I'm hiding some of it, but the pivot table doesn't care. And I hit OK. It's going to create a new sheet here called Sheet 2. And of course, I can rename this. I'll probably call it like Ad Analysis. Now, within this pivot table, I can start to add all the stuff that I care about. So for instance, I can do impressions, clicks, total spent. And as I add these metrics, you'll see it dumps them underneath values over here, which is great. Values in the pivot table is where all of the things that get multiplied, added, divided, etc. go. I could even add social actions if I wanted to see more than just clicks on the call to action or whatever. I could see which ads are getting people to like and comment and even share. Now I get to decide what I want to break this all down by. It's simple enough to bring in your campaign name into rows. And so I can see the performance of every campaign during that time period, which is interesting for sure. But we're not going to stop there. We're going to go all the way down to the individual ad level. If we scroll down here and get to, let's say, the creative name, this is the name that we've given each ad as we created it. And so depending on how you've named your ads, this could be really good. This is going to be a great way of showing you the performance of each of those ads. So for instance, you can see I have the same basic set of ads in multiple campaigns here. And looking at it like this is going to be really confusing. But if I remove campaign name altogether, so now if we scroll down and see just one of these ads, for instance, this one right here, let's say this same ad appeared in 5 or 6 different campaigns. I don't care. I'm adding all of its impressions, its clicks, its spend, and social actions all together just to see how this ad tends to perform overall, regardless of which audience is viewing it. So let's say I haven't named my ads very well. I can remove my creative name and instead put my ad intro text down into rows. And as you can see, the ad intro text is very long, so I'm probably gonna have to reformat it here, make it a little shorter. So now, assuming that my ads have any separate ad all has a different intro text, then we're good here. Every one of these represents a different kind of ad. But just in case you were doing an A/B test based off of an image or maybe even the headline, you could pull headline in instead. So my intro text is actually going to be pretty good because every one of these is a unique ad. So now I get to move on to the analysis part. So looking at all these numbers, this is really confusing. It's kind of messy. And so I do like to format all of these numbers. The really easy way to do this would be to highlight the column and say, if it's impressions, I want this to be a number and remove my decimal places here. And clicks are already pretty clean. Total spent, this is easy. You just hit the $sign and it just turns it into cash. Social actions are already pretty easy. But the way that pivot tables deal with numbers is really odd. If I change anything in this pivot table, for instance, if I add headline to this as well, and then remove it, you can see now my total dollars spent are no longer in dollars. So the cleanest way to make sure that this pivot table is always showing my numbers the way that I want them to is to double click on the header for it and go to number format. And I can say this is currency. I'm okay with 2 decimal places and hit OK. So you can see it keeps resetting my view here, which is really annoying. So until we're done, I'm actually just going to change this to be creative name. And this is going to be a lot easier to deal with. So now no matter what I do, dollars are sticking around here on total spent. We could do the same thing with impressions. I kind of like having the comma marks at the thousands position. So I can do number format, number, and then use 1000 separator and 0 decimal places. Cool. I like that. There's not a whole lot of social actions. They don't go into the thousands. So I'm probably not going to worry about that. I'll probably do the same thing to clicks though. Double click clicks, go to number format, say number with 1000 separator and no decimal places. Great. So we have the basics of ads, but we're probably going to want some additional columns to tell us more about the ads. I'd love to create one for the click-through rate. I'd love to have one for the cost per click. And if we had conversions in here or anything, it might be nice to have conversions, but I'm not going to go that deep today just to keep this simple. The simplest way to do that would be to create this new column called like click-through rate and say equals, my click-through rate is my clicks, so that's C4, over my impressions, that's B4. And then roll that down and then format it the way I want it. The problem is if I add anything to this pivot table, it's just going to overwrite that column and I'm going to lose it. So because of that, I really like to do this right in the pivot table. Here's how you create new calculated fields. When you've clicked anywhere in the pivot table, so obviously not in here, but in here, if you go to pivot table analyze and then fields, items, and sets, and then calculated field, we now get to name this one. So I'm going to call this one CPCs And if I scroll down to find my total spent, that's my costs. Total spent, I can double click it and say my cost per click is my costs, my spend, divided by my clicks. I can double click that as well and hit add. If I hit OK, it is going to replace this column. I just used that for an example. Wow, look at this. Now we have a cost per click that is built right within the pivot table itself. So no matter what I change, if I add new things to the pivot table or take others away, it's always going to carry with it this calculation, which is awesome. I do need to double click on my new metric to turn this into dollars. So I'll go to double click and then number format and currency and hit OK. I don't like these divide by zeros, but I'll show you what to do with them in a moment. Next, I'd really like click-through rate because that tells us how attractive that ad really is to our audience. So if I go to fields, items, and sets, and then calculated field again, this one I'll call CTRs. And of course, the formula for click-through rate is clicks. And because these are just one word, I know what they are. I can just type them in ahead of time. Clicks divided by impressions. And I can hit OK. And then I have click-through rates here. So you can see there's a lot of 0% and 1%. That tells me we just don't have enough decimal places for this to be useful. I like my click-through rates to the 2 decimal. So if I double click here on the sum of click-through rates and go to number format and tell it I want this as a percentage with decimal places 2 and hit OK, now this is useful. Again, I have these divide by zeros. And this is really the data that I'm going to want to deal with. So I think I'm done building new columns. So let's get rid of those divide by zeros that are just kind of in our way. If you're already under the pivot table analyze menu, you can come here to pivot table options. And then here for error values show, we can show it as blank and just leave it and hit OK. Or I can put a 0 in here. And now where we had the broken values before, now we just have zeros. It's a lot cleaner. I really like that. If I get rid of this pivot table builder, it's going to give me a little bit more room to look here. And you can see Excel has put this data in really no particular order. It's actually alphabetically ordered over on this side, but the alphabetical on the ad doesn't really help me all that much. So what I want to do is highlight all of my click-through rates here, not the total at the end. And if I go to home and conditional formatting and then color scales, the first color scale here makes the highest values in green and the lowest in red. So I like that. Now we're very quickly able to figure out which are the ads that get the very best engagement rate. Already I can see some over 1% that are looking great. Next, I want to do the same thing with costs per click, assuming that the higher the cost, the worse it is. So I'm going to highlight again all the values here and go to conditional formatting and color scales. But instead of selecting the first one where high values are green, I'm going to select the second one where the lower is better. You'll also notice that pivot tables aren't great at sorting. I probably don't care a whole lot about these ads that had 0 impressions and spent $0. And it's in the upper portion where I'm going to be spending most of my time looking. So here's a little bit of a hack, a trick for you. If you click right to the right of your pivot table, under the home menu, you can go to sort and filter and hit filter. What it does is it actually makes all the fields of your pivot table now sortable. So if I care only about the ads that are spending the most because they're going to be the most important, I can click down here and say sort by largest to smallest. And check it out. Now I'm just looking at the ads that are the most impactful in my account. So you could imagine if you had your ad data in here with an ad name that you recognized or an ad intro or a headline that you had set, this is going to start to be really, really helpful and really important. And also check this out. We have 2 ads that were basically exactly the same. One's just an A version and one's a B version. This is an A/B test we were running. It's really cool to see how close LinkedIn got the impressions and the clicks and the spend. Those are insanely close, 0.6 around % click-through rates and really similar in cost per click. I wouldn't call either of these a winner over the other one yet, but they did spend a good healthy amount. And as a pro tip to you, if you happen to have additional columns that you'd built inside of your original ad data where you've categorized the ad copy by something specific. So for instance, I could come and insert a column here and call this motivation. Any ad that was aspirational, so maybe it made people feel really good, versus one that was threatening, versus one that was fear-based. This is obviously just making dummy data, but let's say I did this for all of my ads. If I go back to my pivot table, I could hit refresh here to bring in all of my data again back into the pivot table. I can go back to my pivot table field list, and now I can bring in motivation. If I remove creative name, now all of a sudden we can see that, wow, fear-based is actually getting a higher click-through rate than my aspirational. This is just an example. So I'm not recommending that you go and build a whole bunch of ads that strike fear into everybody's hearts, but just so you could understand how you could do this if you created another column where you were classifying the certain type of ad copy you were using. Okay, I'll reset this by getting rid of my motivation, just going back to creative name. And you can see Excel got rid of my color gradients here. But if I can get to a point where the report is the way I want it, I'll just highlight all this and create another one. Color scales, high is green, that's good. And then on CPCs, I'll highlight all of that and say high is bad. If this is a report that I like and I don't want Excel to clear anything out while I mess around, I can always come here and duplicate this data set. So I'll right click on the tab and hit move or copy, click create a copy, and then I can move it to the end. So now I have just a copy here. Instead of ad analysis 2, I might call this one ad name comparison. And then I could go back to ad analysis and play around with this all I wanted. I could bring campaign names into it. I could bring motivations and build a whole bunch of different reports that are breaking down every individual ad. So I hope this was a really helpful walkthrough for you in figuring out how to actually analyze ads inside of Excel rather than relying on the campaign manager platform inside of LinkedIn to do this. Check out a bunch of the other reporting examples that I've already recorded. They're here on the channel. Subscribe if you want to see more advanced LinkedIn ads content coming your way. And again, I'm AJ Wilcox, the founder of B2Linked.com. I'm the host of the LinkedIn Ads Show podcast. I do hope you'll come and subscribe. If you liked this geeky stuff, you're going to love what we do on the podcast. And with that being said, I'll see you back here on the next video, cheering you on in your LinkedIn ads initiatives.